Welcome to the FAA's virtual public workshop on the draft environmental assessment for the South Central Florida Metroplex. I'm Michael OHara, Regional Administrator for the FAA Southern Region. Florida is the only state in the country with 4 major international airports: Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood, Orlando, and Tampa. Palm Beach and St. Pete Clearwater International are also important airports in the national airspace system. In addition, Florida has a significant number of general aviation airports. You get the picture. Florida is one of the busiest states for aviation in the United States. The South Central Florida Metroplex is the FAA's plan to modernize air traffic procedures for 21 airports in the southern half of Florida. Many of the existing procedures are based on outdated technology. While safe, these procedures are less precise and efficient than those based on satellite technology. The satellite-based routes proposed for the Metroplex project will enhance safety and efficiency across the region. Metroplex will benefit passengers by creating more direct routes, decrease congestion at airports and in the air, improve air traffic flows, enhancing safety and efficiency, and reduce complexity and communication for air traffic controllers and pilots, making the system safer. Before we can change procedures, the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, requires us to conduct an environmental assessment to determine the potential impacts of the proposed procedures. One purpose of NEPA is to ensure that proposals, alternatives, and environmental impacts of projects are fully disclosed to the public. That's why we're here today. On May 11th, the FAA posted the Draft Environmental Assessment, or EA, for the Metroplex, and we opened a 60-day public comment period that closes on July 10th. We hope that you will consider submitting comments about the document. On this website, you can click the Comments tab, and it will show you how to submit your comments. It provides email addresses and a physical address where you can send comments after the workshop. Be sure to get your comments in before the July 10th deadline. After the comment period closes, we will review and consider all substantive comments received during the comment period as we develop the environmental determination. We expect to issue the determination by September 30th, 2020. A note about the draft EA. The FAA identified inadvertent errors related to runway designations for Orlando, Tampa, and St. Pete Clearwater International airports. We updated the document on May 13th, and it's posted at metroplexenvironmental.com. I'd like to cover 3 procedural items before we start. First, if you're having technical issues, you can text us anytime during the workshop at 949-478-0253 or click the Technical Support tab on this webpage. Second, the workshop will last 90 minutes. We are recording the workshop and it will be posted on this website tomorrow for you to review. You can share the link with friends and neighbors who are unable to participate today. And finally, we have experts available to answer questions about the draft EA and the proposed air traffic control procedures. FAA air traffic controllers, environmental specialists, and industry representatives will answer your questions after the presentation. As a reminder, the questions asked and answers provided here are not part of the official record for the draft EA. To comment for the official record, click on the Comments tab on this website. That will link you to the FAA's official comment page for this project. Now, Lisa Favors, an environmental specialist for the FAA's Air Traffic Organization, will brief us on the draft environmental assessment.
Thank you, Michael. I will explain the draft EA for the South Central Florida Metroplex. As mentioned earlier, we developed the document in accordance with NEPA, which requires us first to identify the purpose and need for the project. In this case, the purpose and need addresses the current inefficient arrival and departure procedures for airports in South Central Florida. Many of the existing procedures are based on outdated technology and are less precise and efficient than satellite procedures. We need to fix that. The draft EA identifies causes for inefficiency as lack of predictable routes or procedures to transition aircraft between airport runways and high altitude en route airspace. Complex interactions between converging routes and lack of flexibility for air traffic controllers as they transition flights between high altitude and low altitude airspace. By adopting new procedures, which the draft EA calls the proposed action, we expect reduced workload due to fewer controller-pilot communications, more efficient operations due to decreased complexity, and fewer flight segments resulting in more predictable traffic flows. A detailed explanation of the purpose and need is included in Chapter 2 of the draft EA. The draft EA analyzes potential environmental impacts from the proposed action and the no action alternative. It is important to note that we analyzed many additional procedures, but they not carried forward for detailed study in the draft EA because they did not meet the purpose and need or applicable safety standards. Under no action, procedures in place from June 2017 to May 2018 would remain except for planned modifications that are independent of the Metroplex. Our analysis determined that only the proposed action would meet the purpose and need for the project. The no action alternative would not meet the purpose and need, but it was included in the draft EA as required by Council on Environmental Quality Regulations. The alternatives are described in Chapter 3 of the draft EA. Affected environment describes the human, physical, and natural environmental conditions that the proposed action could affect. The affected environment is described in detail in Chapter 4 of the draft EA. The draft EA considers the effects on 14 environmental resource categories and their subcategories identified in FAA guidance. We evaluated the alternatives under conditions forecasted for 2021, the first year the proposed action could be implemented, and under the 2026 forecasted conditions. The evaluation considers the direct, indirect, and cumulative effects of the proposed action and no action alternatives. The draft EA determined that neither the proposed action nor the no action alternatives are likely to cause significant environmental impacts to any of the environmental resource categories. For more information, you can review Chapter 5 in the draft EA. The rest of my discussion will focus on the noise analysis since you, the public, expressed most interest in that. However, feel free to ask questions about any category during the Q&A session later in the workshop. First, I will explain how we measure noise. The FAA measures aviation noise using the day-night average sound level, DNL, metric. DNL represents noise as it occurs over a 24-hour period, with nighttime noise weighted more heavily than daytime noise. DNL is the standard noise metric used for studies of aviation noise exposure in communities. To account for differences in how people respond to noise, we use the A-weighted scale, dBA. This scale closely approximates the volume of sound as perceived by the human ear. The FAA considers aircraft noise exposure of 65 dNL in residential areas and noise increases of dNL 1.5 dB or more for noise-sensitive areas exposed to noise at or above the dNL 65 dB noise exposure level to be significant. The noise analysis demonstrates that the proposed action would not result in significant noise increases. More information about how the FAA measures noise is in Appendix E of the draft EA, and a detailed noise analysis can be found in Appendix I. Before I end, the following video will show you how to look up noise information for your address. You may search more than 122,000 grid points of noise data in the study area, presented in decibels, abbreviated as dB. The grid points are U.S. Census population points located at 1/2 nautical mile intervals across the entire study area. The map opens to the study area. In the search bar, start typing your address and similar addresses will pop up. Click on the correct address and you will see a light blue map pin. The map shows the model grid points in blue. Click on each point to see a pop-up with noise analysis results. The map shows data including DNL calculated for the alternatives and the change in noise when the proposed action is compared to the no action alternative. Now our air traffic control expert will brief you on some of the more significant procedures the Metroplex proposes for your area.
Hello, my name is Scott, and I'm an air traffic controller who works at the FAA's Central Florida Terminal Radar Approach Control, known as TRACON, which manages air traffic for Orlando International and Orlando Executive Airports. In this video, we will walk you through the flight procedure poster boards for Orlando International Airport and Orlando Executive Airport. Each of the following boards shows a sampling of existing flight tracks and the proposed new flight procedures for jet aircraft. Each board will show either arrival or departure aircraft with current day tracks color-coded via altitude. The flight tracks and proposed procedures are all overlaid on a map of the surrounding area. Each flight procedure board is oriented with north facing up. The name of the airport and the names of the flight procedures are in the box on the upper right corner. This box also shows the type of operation, either arrival or departure, and the direction of flight, which we call flow, either north, south, east, or west. Flow is related to the layout of the airport's runways. For example, at Orlando International Airport, there are 4 parallel runways oriented north-south. These runways allow aircraft to land and depart to the north or the south, depending on the direction of the wind and other operational factors. A few acronyms are used in the boards. A standard instrument departure, or SID, is a departure. A standard terminal arrival, or STAR, is an arrival. Area navigation, or RNAV, is the term for modern satellite-based navigation technology used in the proposed procedures. The spelling of each arrival or departure procedure is limited to 5 letters. For example, the spelling of the SNFLD arrival is pronounced Seinfeld. The stars on the board are locations of waypoints, which are fixed navigational points in space that the aircraft fly to. Just as with the spelling of procedures, waypoints are spelled with 5 letters. For example, the PTMAN waypoint would be pronounced Pittman. The proposed flight procedures are colored purple for departures and orange for arrivals. These colored paths show the proposed routes in the future for most flights using the new procedures. Surrounding the paths are dispersed path areas in either pink for departures or yellow for arrivals. These areas show the possible locations where aircraft may fly in the future and account for the possibility of different routing to avoid hazardous weather, for operational need, or for safety. The existing flight tracks are shown on the legend by color, starting from the lowest altitudes in pink, then blue, then teal, and finally the highest altitudes are in green. The flight tracks shown are a sample of jet aircraft operations which occurred from April to May 2018 during the daytime, which does not include nighttime hours between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. The bullet points on the right side provide additional details about the procedures. Next, we'll take a look at a few arrival and departure boards for these airports. This flight procedure board shows Orlando International Airport north flow departures with 7 proposed departure procedures: the Danny, Epcot, Faith, Fishin, Jimmy, Leeward, and Missoula. As you can see, the proposed procedures mimic current day flight tracks airplanes fly today. Generally, aircraft with destinations to the north use the Jimmy and Faith departures. Aircraft with destinations to the east use the Missoula and Danny departures. Destinations to the west use the Epcot and Leeward departures, and destinations to the south use Fishin. Note that when the Palatka Military Operating Area is not in use north of Orlando, departures may be routed directly to the Mickey Waypoint. This waypoint is located farther north and is not shown on the graphic. This flight procedure board shows Orlando International Airport south flow departures with 7 proposed departure procedures: the Danny, Epcot, Faith, Fishin, Jimmy, Leeward, and Missoula. As you can see, the proposed procedures mimic current day flight tracks airplanes fly today. Generally, aircraft with destinations to the north use the Jimmy and Faith departures. Aircraft with destinations to the east use the Missoula and Danny departures. Destinations to the west use the Epcot and Leeward departures. And destinations to the south use the Fishin departure. Note that when the Palatka Military Operating Area is not in use north of Orlando, departures may be routed directly to the Mickey Waypoint. This waypoint is located farther north and is not shown on the graphic.
Hello, my name is Bob, and I'm an air traffic controller who works at the FAA Central Florida Terminal Radar Perch Control, known as TRACON, which manages air traffic for Orlando International and Orlando Executive Airports. This flight procedure board shows the Orlando International Airport north flow arrivals and proposed arrival procedures: the Alina, Grinch, Jafar, Jokers, Pricey, Rides, and Seinfeld. As you can see, the proposed procedures mimic current day flight tracks airplanes fly today. Aircraft arriving from the northeast use the Seinfeld and Alina arrival procedures, and aircraft from the northwest use the Grinch and Jafar arrival procedures. Aircraft from the southwest use the Pricey and Jokers arrivals, and aircraft from the southeast use the Rides arrival procedure. Arrival aircraft typically will fly along the same paths and at similar altitudes as they do today. For example, the procedures coming from the northeast will allow air traffic controllers to blend the Seinfeld arrivals with the Alina arrivals to create a separated single stream of traffic to the runway for landing. This flight procedure board shows the Orlando International Airport's south flow arrivals and 7 proposed arrival procedures: the Alina, Grinch, Jafar, Jokers, Pricey, Rides, and Seinfeld. As you can see, the proposed procedures mimic current day flight tracks airplanes fly today. Aircraft arriving from the northeast use the Seinfeld and Alina arrival procedures, and aircraft from the northwest use the Grinch and Jafar arrival procedures. Aircraft from the southwest use the Pricey and Jokers arrivals, and aircraft from the southeast use the Rides arrival procedure. Arrival aircraft typically will fly along the same paths and at similar altitudes as they do today. For example, the procedures coming from the southwest will allow air traffic controllers to blend the pricey arrivals with the joker arrivals to create a separated single stream of traffic to the runway for landing. This flight procedure board for Orlando Executive Airport is 4 departures. Orlando Executive has 2 runways, and the primary runway for jets is oriented east-west. Orlando International Airport is also shown to the south, bottom of the map, and has 4 runways oriented north-south. There are 2 proposed departure procedures that would be used for jet aircraft departing to the west and east. The west departure procedure is called the tolls, and the east is called the nights. Departing aircraft typically will fly along the same paths and at similar altitudes as they do today. However, air traffic controllers may direct aircraft away from the procedure to avoid hazardous weather, for operational need, or for safety. The radar track data shown are a sample of jet traffic from January to May 2018, which does not include nighttime traffic from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m.
All right, welcome and good evening. Welcome to our workshop for the South Central Florida Metroplex for the Orlando area this evening. I'm Michael OHara, Regional Administrator for the FAA Southern Region, and I'm joined by several technical experts, including John and Robert, who are air traffic controllers from the Orlando International Radar Approach Control, Lisa Favors, an FAA environmental specialist, and we have several airport and airline industry representatives, as well as others from the FAA. John's with us this evening, available to help with any needed Spanish translations. So if that's something that you'd like to get an answer in Spanish, go ahead and just note that in your question that a Spanish translation is requested. As a reminder, we're holding this workshop to answer your questions about the Metroplex project. We're unable to answer questions about other topics in the Metroplex workshop. You can submit your questions to us tonight in the Q&A box on Zoom or the chat in Facebook or YouTube. You can text us if you'd prefer to come direct by text at 949-478-0253. Again, that number for a text is 949-478-0253. And if you need technical assistance, please click on the technical support tab on our website. I also want to remind everybody that the questions that are asked in the workshop are not part of the legal record for the draft environmental assessment. So to comment for the record, you're going to want to go to the comments tab on floridametroplexworkshops.com, or you can email us or send us a written comment. And those addresses are also on the comments tab on the website. So thanks again for joining us. We're going to go ahead and jump right in. We have our first question. I live north of Orlando International and east of Orlando Executive Airport. It looks like I'm getting a lot of flights over my house. Is this new with the Metroplex? Bob, you may have something to add to that, but I'll share that no changes have been implemented with this South Central Florida Metroplex project. We don't anticipate making any changes anytime earlier than the spring of 2021. Bob, I think you're muted.
Sorry, thanks, Michael.
Oh, good.
Yeah, you're correct, Michael. At this time, there's been no changes implemented in the current flight procedures, so there's really nothing else to add to that. There's been no changes.
All right, Bob, thank you. All right, here's a question. Can the airport limit loud aircraft or reduce hours of operation? All right, I'm going to go to, I'm going to see if Phil Brown at GOA would help with that one. Good evening, Phil.
Good evening. Good to see you, Michael. As a public airport, public use airport, Orlando International is prohibited from restricting operations or the allowance of airports to operate. They have to operate without restrictions. It can't impose any restrictions on aircraft types, hours of operation, or frequency of flights.
Okay. All right. I don't know if anybody else has anything they want to add to that answer. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll continue. Well, this one may be yours as well, Phil. What does Orlando International Airport do to help reduce aircraft noise? I'm not going to try to. I promise I won't toss you many of these, Phil, but that one may be best answered by you as well. And it looks like you're muted.
So thanks, Michael. The FAA is solely responsible for the routing of the aircraft in the air and on the ground. However, Orlando International, as well as Orlando Executive, has a comprehensive program for airport noise abatement. We have an airport noise abatement committee that meets on a monthly basis if they have an agenda. We always try to work with our local partners. We've worked pretty diligently with a number of neighborhoods in the area, like Nona, Conway, those areas. So we use the airport noise abatement committee as a forum for the community, so they can voice their concerns. Those are citizens that served on that committee. There are some appointments from the airport as well as representatives from airlines that listen to the concerns of citizens and try and address them the best they can. Ultimately, the routing of the aircraft is a function of safety and is under the auspices of the FAA.
I'll add to that. Thanks, Phil. But obviously, this is a FAA project that we're talking about with the Metroplex. It's a proposed federal action, which is why we review it as in accordance with NEPA. Lisa, I don't know if you or anyone else in industry have anything else to add on the FAA side about what we're doing to help reduce aircraft noise, or maybe where the public can learn a little bit more about that.
Michael, if I may chime in.
Yes.
Yes, hi, this is Virginia Sanchez with American Airlines. And Michael, just wanted to point out that American has always been very conscientious in how we operate around those communities that are very concerned about noise. We have either removed or retired some aircraft from our fleet that are noisy, or we consider noisy, and also have reduced others. So our goal is always to work with the airports and the FAA on this issue.
Virginia, thank you.
Hi, Virginia, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, the FAA, we've worked for many years with the industry partners and specifically our Office of Environment and Energy. And you can find a whole host of information to read about the efforts that we've done across the board to make things a little bit quieter. If you go to FAA.gov, and once you're there, you can search Office of Environment and Energy, and that will put you in the proper place to find some additional information. Thanks, Michael.
All right, thank you. Thank you all. All right, looks like we have another question here. Why wouldn't you put the airplane roadway in the sky in a non-residential area around, for example, east of Orlando, running parallel along State Road 15 or Narcoossee Road? No one lives in that area. Bob, can you help with that one?
Sure, Michael, thanks. We do have a downwind close to State Road 15, which runs north-south with the runway. Aircraft are balanced between the runways. If only one runway was used, there would be a significant amount of delays incurred by the airport.
Okay. All right. I don't know if, and did we want to show anything, any kind of graphics for that, Bob? I'm not sure. I guess
I don't think we need a board for this one, Michael, but if they would like to put one up, I'll be fine with it.
I'm sure we'll pull one up later. Maybe we can refer back. So,
okay.
All right, we have another question here. Do I understand correctly? The current flows will move and align with the SID routes. Currently, they seem similar. However, you are saying they will move to follow the SID, correct?
I guess I can take this one also, Michael. The SIDs for south departures are the same as it is now. There's no change with the flow. North SIDs remain east of the roads and are nav off the ground. They provide safe and predictable courses which are from the runway, and we can show that board as far as zoomed in for the SIDs if we'd like to pull it up.
Okay.
So with this right here, you can see that these are very predictable routes. With the aircraft coming off, it is much more predictable for the controller. For the folks on the ground, they can see exactly where the aircraft are going to be at. Whereas today they come off on headings which are affected by wind drift, and it creates a lot of problems about how to separate the airplanes.
Okay, Bob, thank you.
And Michael, Jim here. I'd like to weigh in on that one too. That was a good example, that north board, because you can see from the color of the tracks that we are not making any significant change below 10,000 feet. So those green areas well to the north, those are above 10,000 feet. When you get in closer, we try to align the tracks with we call it a noise backbone, where the procedures are flying essentially right now. So that was part of our operating methodology here, was to limit the number of changes below 10,000 feet. Although there were some adjustments in there, for the most part, you won't see any significant changes below 10,000 feet.
All right, Jim, good point. All right, we'll continue to work through these. What was the airport's role in Metroplex procedure design? So we kind of touched on that one earlier. I'll take this one, but the airport authority's not deciding how the procedures need to be designed. That's an FAA responsibility. The airport engages with the FAA. We work with the airport because they understand the communities around the airport and their vision for the airport. We also work with the airlines, many of whom you see represented here, pilot groups, because they operate the airplanes. They have the equipment in the flight deck that's used to fly these procedures, and we look to them to ensure that any changes or any new procedures are flyable. So it's definitely a joint effort, but the FAA has the primary responsibility. Not sure if anybody else wants to add to that. Gary, do you want to say something?
Sure, Michael, I can help. We do take an active role in participating with the FAA on a technical basis to be able to give them information on the flyability and how the procedures will work in each type of aircraft that will be using the procedure. We want to be sure that when we help with the FAA, we give them the ability to see data from our simulators to be able to know that when we turn these on, they work perfectly and they are safe. Thank you.
Michael, if I may just add just something on this. I think this process has shown just how important collaboration is between stakeholders such as airports, airlines, and the FAA. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time, but it's been a critical piece in understanding each other's needs, and working together has proven to be quite effectively for all of us and efficient in getting all our messages out. So I want to say thank you because into the airport, you know, we clearly, MIA and Orlando are key airports for us here in Florida. So being part of the dialogue has been a very important piece of this process.
Virginia, Gary, thank you both. Okay, so next question we have, will the new procedures increase the noise generated from aircraft? Lisa, can you take that one?
Sure. The FAA's environmental analysis for the project looked at more than 210,000 U.S. Census data blocks for the year 2010. Now, within those areas, it determined that modeled noise levels at more than 117,000 points. It showed that the proposed procedures would not result in any significant or reportable noise increases under FAA criteria. Thanks, Michael.
All right, thank you, Lisa. All right, we're seeing a lot of people on Zoom, on social media. Keep those questions coming. You can text us a question at 949-478-0253, or you can use the Zoom Q&A button, and we'll just keep moving through those. All right, we have another question here. On a north flow departure, can anybody admit if you will follow the informal noise abatement procedures with the City of Belle Isle? Bob, can you help with that?
Sure, Michael. With the north flow procedures, they're actually an improvement. What we have built here with the RNAV departure is actually an improvement over to what we have today, due to the fact that today is a vector or a heading assigned to the aircraft off the runway, which, as I said earlier, is subject to wind, drift. When the pilot turns, the discretion to the pilot when they start to turn. With these RNAV procedures, the aircraft will be kept actually east of Conway Road, northbound, and it actually improves the modeling. It will ensure that the aircraft are within the noise abatement procedures that are actually in effect today. It will actually improve it.
Right, and Bob, Jim here, if I can just add on to that, I think that's another prime example of the types of benefits that we get from flying this type of procedure. So, it's accurate, it's repeatable, it's not impacted by wind. Of course, the airframe is always going to be impacted by wind, but the procedure itself, takes that into account and gives the flight management system, gives the pilot what he needs to stay on the intended path of the procedure. I don't know, maybe there's somebody from industry that could weigh in with us and give us a little bit of insight on how those procedures benefit them in the on the flight deck.
Yeah, this is Dan with Alba. The only reason I could think you'd end up over Belle Isle in today's procedure even is if you had to climb out on a day where it's overcast and you had to climb out on the west runway, it's like a 3-6 right or left, and you had to climb to 1,000 feet, and if you had a wind from the east, then it might push you a little over Belle Isle. But otherwise, generally speaking, and especially in weather like good weather, you're making a right turn off to the northeast, and you'll be away from Belle Isle. And then these RNAV procedures will just guarantee that, because like the other panelists are saying, then they're pretty much locked in on that regardless of the winds, and then you can begin that turn sooner whenever the procedure specifies it.
I'd like to also add in there that we're remaining east of the highway. We're staying on the path longer before the turn to the west, causing no significant noise increase. The current heading for ATCs to try to hit a 010 10-degree heading, taking winds into account. Now with the new RNAV heading will be a flat 6 degrees, which basically puts us right exactly where we're supposed to be at.
Good tag team effort on that one. All right, we'll continue. Here's another question. I see flights going over Lake Jesup. Did we study the environmental impacts? Lisa, well, let's start with you on that. And I don't know if there's anything to add from an air traffic perspective.
Sure, I can talk to the environmental impacts. You know, the draft, we looked at many categories in the draft EA and studied those impacts. And it is very important to note that no impacts in any of the categories. We did not reach the threshold for environmental impacts in any of those categories. So yes, we did look at the environmental. Does anybody else from air traffic want to jump in about that area specifically?
Hey, Lisa, I'll throw a little bit of a twist on it there. There's a lot of national park areas there in Florida, and don't we have to do some kind of special coordination with the National Park Service when we're flying over those areas?
Yes, we do, and we're currently coordinating with them as well. And again, the threshold of significance is a little different for national park areas, and we did not reach those thresholds in any of the national park areas across the whole study area. So thank you, Jim, for that point.
This is Dan. The difficulty with that question also is it's right next to Sanford. So we don't know, based on the question, are they arriving and departing from Sanford, or are they coming into MCO? So that once we know that would help clarify where the issues lie. But it's kind of confusing because of that part right now. And the questioner may not know either where they're headed. So I don't know how to help out on that one.
All right, good point, Dan. Everybody, appreciate the help with that question. Okay, we'll just keep moving here. I've noticed that aircraft altitudes over the Wekiwa,
I think.
Wekiwa, thank you, Longwood area vary during the late evening and early morning hours. Will Metroplex procedures raise south flow arrivals over my location? My apologies for the pronunciation there. So will the Metroplex procedures raise south flow arrivals over my location? Lisa, did you have something there, or Bob?
I was just going to jump in from the environmental standpoint, but we'll let Bob start off.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Lisa. There will be no real change in the altitude coming over Wekiwa or the Longwood area during the late evening or early morning hours. However, the aircraft in this type of descent and these type of procedures will have specific altitudes to come down under a lower power setting for the aircraft, which means that there'll be lower noise levels generated on the ground.
All right, very good. So we'll move on then. How many more meetings are going to be held? How many more, I guess, workshops? Are they all virtual? So we do have this workshop tonight in a virtual workshop format. This is the 4th out of 12 virtual public workshops that we're holding during these first 2 weeks of June. And they will continue to be in this same format. We'll have a recording of today's session available tomorrow. You can see recordings of any of the sessions that have already occurred. They're available for playback, or you can tell friends and neighbors about the workshops as well. They can either watch that, or we'll be holding another live workshop for the Orlando area this Friday, June 12th at 3 p.m. And our goal is to cover the changes that are proposed for procedures at 4 major international airports across Florida, including Orlando, Tampa, Fort Lauderdale, and Miami, and 17 additional airports. Because we want to provide residents the opportunity to participate in a setting like this, to understand our project, to ask questions of our air traffic control and environmental experts others who have worked on the project, and then importantly to submit comments. I know I said it earlier, I may say it a few times, but the discussion that we have during the workshop is not part of the official record. You're going to want to go to floridametroplexworkshops.com and click on the comments page. You can either submit a comment there, or you'll find the addresses to mail those in to us or email those in. Okay, there's a question. It's hard to see on the diagram. Will there be more traffic over Fells Cove, Lake Toha, when the south flow uses Missoula or Danny? So maybe we can pull that. Maybe we can pull that chart up and show it a little bit larger. If you're in the Zoom tool, you can make the shared part of the screen a little bit larger, or you can also go back into the workshop area at floridametroplexworkshops.com. You can click on Orlando, and you can pull up those boards, the videos, and watch those. You can kind of see those without our pictures on the screen and take a little bit more time if that's helpful. Let me come back to you, Bob, and see if you can explain that maybe a little bit better.
There'll be, thanks, Michael. There'll be no additional traffic, no changes to the volume of traffic on the south flow when aircraft are using the Missoula or the Dandy departure SIDS. There is no increase at all. Basically, the same amount of aircraft that are flying it today.
Okay, Bob, thanks. Okay, will there be a significant change in noise landing or departure north of Orlando International, just north of Gatlin Avenue and probably 3 blocks east of Conway Road? Okay, that's pretty specific. So Lisa, maybe that's an opportunity for us to pull up the noise tool and we can zoom right into that area and make sure people know how that works.
Sure, that's a very specific area. We can, once you came into this workshop on the main page of the workshop, you'll notice some buttons across the top, and one of those buttons says Noise Tool. If you click on that Noise Tool, it will bring you to this web page that has all the information that you would need to know about that specific area. The draft EA modeled aircraft noise exposure for the proposed new procedure and the no action alternative under 2021 and 2026 forecasted conditions. And we consider the direct and indirect and cumulative impacts of noise. It's important to note that on this website, it also shows the significance threshold. It tells you about significance. It tells you about the reportable noise threshold as well. So once you see that information, just below that on the map itself, there is a search bar. You can type specific addresses that you're concerned about, whether it's your home or your church or whatever the case may be. You can search it there, start typing, and then you can click on the proper address, and that address will show up on that light blue map pin. Now, the little circles around that area, the little blue circles around that area, those are those census data points that we talked about earlier in the video. And if you click on that, it will show you the proposed action, the change in noise for the proposed action, the no action, and the change in noise at specific points, the data points. So all around that residence or that location, you're able to get that information here during the workshop. You can do it after the workshop. This information will also still be available for some time on that workshop, on the workshop website, and you're welcome to use that whenever. I think that might cover it. Thanks, Michael.
Okay, Lisa, thanks. Now, you may have mentioned the numbers, my apologies, but those look like they were less than half a decibel or half a dB different at those points, at least at that in that particular case. So you can see that whether it's a minor increase, a minor decrease, or potentially no change, but that information is available in the tool. So, all right, very good, thank you. All right, here's a question. Why is the data so old from 2018? I may come back to you on that, Lisa. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Sure. You know, the environmental assessment takes many months to analyze and to go through, and sometimes those become years to prepare, and the data used as a baseline may appear to be slightly dated, but more importantly, the environmental assessment forecasts air traffic volumes for the years 2021 and 2026 to aid in identifying the possible impacts. Additionally, if today's data were used, it would not reflect what has been more commonly experienced because of air traffic volume has been so heavily impacted due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we are confident that we have taken a very conservative approach in our analysis. Thanks, Michael.
Right.
Thank you, Lisa. Jim, did you have something?
Wouldn't it follow that if you used a lesser standard, then you wouldn't show the degree of impact that we're forecasting if we were, full on, without any delays whatsoever? So it would logically seem that we benefit people by using a little bit harder standard than we would if we modeled today's traffic, which would be relatively insignificant comparatively.
Very good point, Jim. You're absolutely right.
Right, that makes sense. But I think the reality is where you started there specifically, Lisa, that that's the newest data that was available at the time that analysis was performed. So, okay. All right, thank you both. Why aren't Lisa, you're in a stretch. You must have said something that caught people's attention. Why aren't the late flights after 11 p.m. included in the data? Maybe you can help clarify that. Okay, I can try. Night flights are counted in the analysis. DNL, which is the day-night average sound level, is a 24-hour average sound level from midnight to midnight after a 10 decibel, after adding 10 decibels to that to account for noise between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. And that additional decibel, adding that, it helps to account for a greater level of annoyance caused by nighttime events. So we do take that into consideration when we are doing the analysis. Thanks, Michael. All right, Lisa, and I just want to make sure. So the question, which you answered, but the question is, why aren't the flights after 11 included in the data? What you're saying is they are counted, and in fact, they're weighted more heavily. Just want to make sure I'm saying that's right. Exactly right. Okay. You're a good student. Thank you, Michael. Right. Okay, we'll continue. The questions keep coming. During any given week, how often will the new procedures be used? If it's 2 a.m. in the morning, is the Metroplex procedure still used, or does the controller clear the aircraft, direct, visual, etc.? Bob?
Sure. At 2 a.m. in the morning, we have nighttime noise procedures. And during the nighttime noise procedures, we will adhere to those. And during other times outside of the nighttime, we will use the new Metroplex procedures. Thank you, Michael.
All right, thank you, Bob. All right, we have another question. Are the exact departure procedures for North Flow posted on the website? Specifically, what is the track heading for departures of Orlando of MCO West runways? Jim, I may tag team that with you, but I think we're both familiar. All of the procedures, and there's a lot of data that's out on the environmental website, the draft EA. That's it. Metroplexenvironmental.com, and you can go in, you can click on the South Central Florida Metroplex workshop, and you can download the document, but there also are, I'm trying to think of the detailed study documents. Maybe you can clean that up for me a little bit, and I'll just.
We're talking about the design team final report. So that includes all of the procedures that are being proposed, and all of the display boards show all of the traffic that is being modeled off that west complex. So those west runways, absolutely, this is what we're proposing, and that's what we want the public to comment on.
Okay, and then there's also Google Earth data that's there. There are files that you can download, kind of zoom in more to the street level and see the proposed tracks and waypoints, which is often helpful if you're looking for that type of detail.
Right,
Bob,
and those are, I'll have to say that's a little bit more challenging. So for people who are not kind of tech savvy and able to use Google Earth and work through those files, the information that's on the website, the our current website, the website that we're using now, I'm sorry, the workshop website, then that information is probably going to be a little bit easier to use for the average person.
And then Bob, I may ask you to help with this. I may be putting you on the spot, but it's asking the track heading for departures of the Orlando West runways. So I want to say that they're going to be taking the runway heading, but I don't want to misspeak on that. So can you help with that? What's in the proposed procedure for the track heading on the departures for Orlando West runways?
Well, sure, Mike. I believe we've already addressed that, but I'll address it again. It will still be runway heading the 006 off the west end of the departure SID, which we had said before, which is more accurate and is better for the residents. It locks the aircraft down to a specific route, thus keeping those aircraft on the route that we want them to reduce the noise.
All right. Okay, thanks, Bob. There's a question. What's the learning curve like for the pilot in learning this new, it says navigational aid, but what's the learning curve when we transition procedures in the next gen environment? Dan, is that something you'd like to help with?
Sure. Yeah, it's kind of like if you have a train engineer went to home one day from work and the next day they had moved the track over a little bit, not the whole thing, but pieces of it. Next day you came in and the learning curve is just drive the train down the track. So it's not, there's no change in the learning for that. The only thing would be maybe to be aware that it's in a different spot than it was. You're not surprised, but it's gonna, as long as you have it dialed in, it's gonna navigate along that path. So there's no change.
Gary, did you have something to add?
You bet. I can add a little bit. When pilots go through their pilot training to fly each individual aircraft that we fly, we receive very specific training on how to use all the automation on board the aircraft. It's that automation, those computers that assist us in flying the paths of these new procedures. So lateral paths, the highway that we're talking about, the vertical portion of it, how to control the speed, all of those are incorporated into the computer system in the airplane. And during all of our training, we get trained on how to use that automation. So Dan's right, it's just a different path that we fly. It's very simple.
All right, great. Thank you both, Dan and Gary. Just glancing to see if anybody else sort of has their mute button off. So we'll move on to the next question. Let's see, is Friday's meeting or Friday's workshop any different than today's? So I'll say fundamentally no. Our intent was to offer multiple options, different times of days as we looked at the major cities across the state in order to ensure that we had the best opportunity to reach the public. So if you were in the workshop earlier tonight, you know that we started out with a welcome video and some environmental information that Lisa shared, as well as a description of the airspace and the procedures from our air traffic controllers, and then we went into this live Q&A session. That'll be the same exact format for Friday. Those intro remarks, if you will be nearly identical, probably identical, and then the Q&A will just be driven by what comes in that session. So it's not like a part one and a part two, it's just two different opportunities to participate. As I mentioned earlier, both of those will be recorded. So if it's more convenient for someone to watch this on Thursday, they can come back to the website, floridametroplexworkshops.com, and they'll find that tonight's session is available for them at that time. Okay. There's a question. Does this change any of the typical preferred holding points on approach to Orlando or maybe other airports? Where can residents expect to see or hear holding aircraft should there be an airport delay or issue? Bob, that sounds like a good air traffic question.
It sure does, doesn't it, Michael? There's not going to be any changes on the holding on any of the procedures coming in. If the aircraft are delayed because of weather at the airport or for whatever reason, if they have to hold, the points are exactly the same places as they are today.
All right, very good. All right, we'll continue. The FAA is apparently implementing new and upgraded ILS approaches into Orlando within the next 2 to 5 years. Does this environmental assessment address these FAA improvements? Okay. Bob, are you familiar with that one? Can I give that to you?
Yeah, I'm sure I'll take that too. Yeah, there is a new Cat 3 standard instrument approach procedure that is coming into MCO, and it is taken into account in this project with the environmental assessment.
Hey, Michael, I'd like to maybe tag team that a little bit with Lisa, because we were pretty specific, 2 to 5 years. So if it is something that is incorporated as part of this project, it's incorporated in this environmental assessment. But Lisa, if it's something outside of this, doesn't it require a separate environmental review?
Yes, you're correct, Jim. If it's something separate from the Metroplex, there are several projects going on in South and Central Florida that are independent of this Metroplex, completely separate projects. And anything that happens outside of this project will go its own route for environmental review, whatever that is for that particular project. So yes, anything outside of what's proposed here for the next 3 to 5 years will be a separate environmental process.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. And I think you can unmute again, but the next question is, please define or explain what is a significant impact to an environmental category such as noise.
Okay, the draft environmental assessment reviewed numerous resource categories, and including noise. And you may go on that noise tool that we talked about on the main workshop website to get more information, especially that really gives you detailed information about the impacts at a particular area. You can also review the draft environmental document, and I think that information can be found in Chapter 5 of the draft EA. But more specifically, to answer the question, a significant noise increase is more than 1.5 dB increase in the 65 or higher DNL.
Okay.
Thanks, Michael.
And I know it wasn't part of the question, but we talked about reportable as well. Maybe a good time just to tack that on. So we say there's no significant and no reportable noise increases.
That is correct. For this project, there were no significant or reportable noise increases. And again, you can see that difference. If you go back to, and we can go back, if we can pull up that noise tool again, I can Just a moment.
All right.
Very good. On that website, if you look right just before the map, just in case you forget what the those thresholds are of significance, there's a significance threshold and there's also a reportable threshold. And that information is also on this website.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, next, another question. Where else has the FAA done projects like this? And what can you tell us about those projects? Jim, I may tee that up with you, and then we may have some industry support on that answer as well.
Right, Michael, I'm happy to take that one. South and Central Florida is the 11th and final Metroplex project. Another project that is very close to completion is the Las Vegas project, which just released the final environmental assessment today. We still have several months to go before that project is implemented. Each one of them has the same basic purpose and need. It's operational efficiency and safety. So within that context, though, each one of them has unique features that we try to work with, and it could be terrain, weather, the operational scenario there, and a couple of examples would be in Southern California, which is a very, very constrained airspace in the LA basin, where we tried to deconflict all of the adjacent airports in that area, and there's a half a dozen of them in pretty close proximity. When we go to Las Vegas, although it's not as busy as a location as the LA basin, but it's very constrained by surrounding military special activity airspace, like Nellis Air Force Base and some of the things that go on out there in the desert. So the PBN procedures really have to work in that airspace. So we're really hopeful that that one's going to turn out well for us. We just did one in Cleveland and Detroit where we previously had no PBN procedures whatsoever. And we were able to do some, I think, some pretty impressive things at Detroit. We implemented triple simultaneous parallel arrivals at the airport, and on the initial analysis seemed to have had a pretty positive impact on the throughput at the airport itself. So I know we have Greg Young on here from Delta. They've got an operation there at Detroit. Greg, can you weigh in and give us some input?
Well, certainly. I'd like to step in and revert back here to a few questions prior on the Cat 3 approaches that are about to be published for Orlando. There was some interest out there. I'd just like to expand on that. Cat 3 approaches simply allow aircraft to land, to continue the approach and land in worse weather than they would with normal Cat 1 approaches. The tracks and the altitude constraints and the constraints that they follow on the procedure to the runway are nearly identical and many times often identical to the Cat 1 approaches. The difference is in the last 200 feet down to the runway, where the improvements or the differences might be something to the effect of the quality of the navigation signals surveyed to be of a higher fidelity, signs might be improved, lighting might be improved, and similar items like that. Gary McMullen, who is a procedure designer, is one of the best in the business, and he may be able to expand on the design differences in Cat 3 approaches versus Cat 1 approaches.
Thank you, Greg. I can add just a little bit to the conversation, but the most important thing that all of us of airlines and pilots is to have safety built into the system. And what these approaches do, and the value to us is it allows us to land in very low weather conditions, heavy rain, low fog. It allows us to continue to the airport and land and get our passengers to the destination that they want to get to. It's incredibly valuable for us as an airline, for the airlines to be able to have this function. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Greg and Gary. Sorry, I went on mute there for a second. Any other feedback on the Metroplex implementations anywhere else? I don't know if anybody had anything else to share on that. All right, so Jim, thanks for the background on that as well. I'm going to move to the next question. Where do I file a noise complaint? All right. So let me tee that one up, Lisa. I know you have some more information as well.
Sure.
But what I would say is there are different paths, and maybe there are a couple different kinds of complaints. And a lot of times the airport actually they have a team that's prepared and they answer those. And I've heard some really great examples. For example, when there may be a disabled aircraft on a runway, or that other aircraft are using a different runway in the middle of the night than normal. The airport's going to know that, and they have all of that information, and they're able to provide a very effective response in a case like that. There are other times that it may be procedure-based or related to air traffic, and those types of noise complaints will often come to the FAA. But we work in partnership with the airport to make sure we both understand the types of complaints in an airport. So I'll see, Lisa, if you can describe maybe the best place for people to find us at the FAA. And then
Sure.
if the airport wants to add anything to that, certainly they're welcome.
Sure. You can learn more about the aviation noise and all kind of information about aviation noise at the FAA.gov website. And once you're there, it's important to search for the southern region, because you'll get kind of lost in the shuffle if you don't search in the southern region. And on that site, you can find a host of links about aviation noise, and also a link where you can file a complaint or an inquiry about specific noise complaints there. Thank you, Michael.
All right, Lisa, thanks. Phil, I don't know if there's anything you want to add from the airport perspective, but as I said, I know we both handle noise comments, different complaints at times, and I know our team works with your team.
Thank you, Michael. We have a telephone number, but we also have a link on our website, orlandoairports.com, so people can go to the website and file a complaint there.
All right, very good. Thanks, Phil. Okay. So we have another question. Why did the future traffic forecasts only include jet aircraft and not, quote, non-turbojet aircraft? Somebody's seen a note somewhere on that. Lisa or Jim, do you want to try that one?
Right, Michael. Well, the analysis is based upon passenger, cargo, and general aviation jet traffic activity. So beyond that, I'm not certain why we don't, unless we had a very large turboprop aircraft that was going to fly those types of procedures. And I can't imagine why we would incorporate that type of aircraft in the evaluation. But I have to defer to Lisa in this area. I'm not certainly not the environmental expert.
You're absolutely right. We don't generally evaluate IFR activity in flight levels. So on our analysis. So I don't have anything to add on that other than we can get some more information on that. I can certainly find out more information on that. And you're welcome to, and I encourage anyone, if we're not satisfying your curiosity in whatever we're doing, if you would definitely click on the link to have a specific comment, and you can have that included. That will be included in the official record for this environmental process. You will find those in the final document, and that answer will be given there.
Right, maybe we can add this one to something we need to look into, and we can have it available on Friday. So check.
Oh, there we go. I will do that. We can certainly do that. We can have this as one of the questions we come back to on Friday. If you join us back here then. Hopefully we'll have an answer for you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you both. All right, let me remind folks, thanks for asking many great questions. Please keep in mind we're only answering questions specifically about the Florida Metroplex project, so keep those coming, and you can send those at 949-478-0253, or use the Q&A feature here in Zoom, or the chat function, I think, on other social media. 949-478-0253. All right, we'll move on. Are the future aircraft tracks and resulting projected noise levels based on only airline passenger, cargo, and GA jet aircraft traffic activity? It sounds like it's in the same area as the last question, but anything more to add?
It is kind of in the same area. The noise I can tell you that the noise analysis evaluated noise exposure to communities within the general study area from aircraft forecasted to be operating under an IFR filed flight plans at altitudes between ground level up to 18,000 feet above AGL, above ground level. And that is due to the presence of one or more national parks. So, you know, IFR filed aircraft activity was forecasted for years 2021 and 2026. And we used the model conditions under both the proposed action and the no action alternative. And again, you know, we found no significant impacts in any of those categories.
Okay, Lisa, and I'll clarify IFR. I know sometimes we do that. So that's instrument flight rules. So if they filed a flight plan and the study area is, think of it basically as the southern half of the state of Florida. So it's not like it's a local area around Orlando. It's everything from Tampa, St. Pete over through Orlando and then down toward Miami. So the study area includes 21 airports in the state. And that's what was used, the historic track data, to forecast the differences between the proposed action and the no action alternative for those 2 years Lisa mentioned. Looking to see if anybody else is jumping in on that.
I might jump in just for a quick comment. For those of you out there in the community who might not know a difference between an IFR or a VFR flight plan. So for aircraft who intend or want to enjoy the privileges of flying in less than ideal weather, you have to file a flight plan, and certainly all the commercial operators do, airlines, cargo. A VFR flight plan, or when you're operating VFR, depending on the type of airspace, and Bob might want to jump in here as a local airspace expert, you may not always need to file a flight plan. So if someone just wants to hop in their airplane and go for a spin, as long as they stay clear of certain pieces of controlled airspace, filing a flight plan simply isn't necessary. And it could be that when Lisa and her analysts look for data to include in a study like this, the records simply might not be complete, or simply might not provide a data set that is useful, because that sector or that particular slice of airspace user is hard to track, simply because they are not required to file a flight plan. There may not be complete records. I just offer that up, and Bob, I'm sure, knows his airspace inside now. He might have a comment.
Thanks, Greg, but not to get too technical with it. There are lots of aircraft that fly every day in the National Airspace System that do not file flight plans, or what we can call visual flight rules, VFRs, and they are very hard to track down. But there's new technology coming into play in the next few years that those aircraft will be what they call ADS-B equipped. So But what Greg said is true. You can't track at this point in time what we use for data. It's not regulatory to those aircraft yet to have that type of equipment installed. So there are a lot of aircraft out there that are on track, but there's different types of airspace that they do have to talk to air traffic controllers to protect airports like Orlando International, which is we call a Class Bravo airspace, which is a totally controlled airspace, which segregates and keeps those aircraft out of there unless they're under air traffic control.
So one other quick thought. Thank you, everybody on that. Is we're not anticipating changes, and correct me if I say this the wrong way, but if an aircraft's filing a VFR flight plan, we're not expecting that to change under the Metroplex project. So there would be no difference under the proposed action versus the no action. So even if that were modeled, that wouldn't show any distinction. Okay. All right, I'm going to move on. I think we had a good team effort on that one. Will runway 36 departures after 11 p.m. still use the 060 departure heading? Bob?
It sounds like a very simple question, so I'm going to give it a very simple answer. The answer is yes. They will still use the 060 heading. That's a nighttime heading. Thanks, Michael.
All right, thank you, Bob. Okay, have you factored in the growth of air traffic at Orlando? I would think the repetition of aircraft flying a particular route would have to increase as the volume of traffic at the airport increases. Lisa or Jim? I can't tell who you're pointing at, Jim.
Oh, I was giving it a thumbs up because, I mean, and I know Lisa will get a little more in depth. The answer is yes.
Go ahead, Jim. I'll let you finish and then I'll jump in.
Well, the forecast, that's absolutely what it does, is we look at what the projected increase in traffic for the location is over a period of years, and we take the 5-year look ahead from when we plan to implement. So 21, we had the forecast before the COVID impacts, and then in 26 we had the forecast increase, and that is absolutely what we modeled the noise on. So, and in both cases, Lisa, the answer was
yes.
For no significant impacts or no reportable impacts in that.
Yes, in both cases there were no reportable or significant noise impacts, and you're absolutely right, Jim. We looked at the future year noise exposure levels for between 2021 and 2026 for the number of aircraft, the number and the type of aircraft, and the same under both the proposed action and the no action. So you're absolutely right. The proposed action does not include developing or constructing facilities such as runways and terminal expansions that would be necessary to accommodate the increase in aviation activity. Therefore, no additional growth in operations is associated with the project, is anticipated.
Okay, thank you both.
Thank you.
I'm going to keep pushing through. Will the application of the new technology increase the frequency of flights? Bob, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. It's kind of in the same area. We're not the number of flights doesn't increase.
Michael, I can say that the new technology really only looks to manage air traffic operation in a more efficient manner while enhancing safety. Realistically, the increase of flights would be determined by many other external factors, driven by whether it be the airlines or the other users of the national airspace system, how much they want to come to Orlando. That would be really the driving factor for the amount of flights coming in.
Okay. All right, and then I know Jim mentioned, I think it was Jim mentioned earlier, that we tried to design routes along the kind of the backbone of noise. Jim may not have said that, but he said it before at least. So if planes are flying along a particular route, we expect them to generally be along that same route. And so that would be frequency from another perspective. Did the environmental assessment address future noise levels resulting from any planned runway extensions, new runways, and or new ILS approaches implemented by the FAA at either Orlando, Sanford, Orlando Exec, or Kissimmee? All right. So touched on a little bit of that part of that, but Lisa, do you?
I was just about to say we touched on that a little bit, but basically the proposed action does not include developing or constructing facilities such as those runways or terminal expansions that could be necessary to accommodate the increase in aviation. The short answer is if in fact those projects happen at whatever runway expansions or anything like that, it would take a separate environmental route. It will, the environmental will be assessed separately outside of this Metroplex. It's not a part of this project, and it would not be a part of this analysis. So that's a short answer to that question. Thank you.
So that refers to any planned runways, new runways, extensions, but we did touch on an ILS, the Cat 3 approach earlier, right? That is a part of this project. Okay.
Correct. Thank you, Michael.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. All right, here we have a question. Executive jets seem to back down their engines over Chulauda when setting up to land. Chulauda, how's that? When setting up to land, I presume at Orlando Executive. Why is that?
Juliota.
Thank you.
Michael, this is Heidi. So I think what I would offer there, while I'm not familiar with that specific waypoint, it sounds like that the aircraft is actually setting up for descent.
Okay.
And when we do that, we're typically throttling back engines, establishing a constant speed and descent rate. So we do that by throttling back and doing certain things with the aircraft to make sure that we're on a very stable and safe descent path.
All right, that makes sense, Heidi. Thank you. Anybody else have anything to add to that one, that question or answer?
This is Dan. I similar. I would just have to guess that that's for if it's into MCO as opposed to ORL. It depends, but if it is, I think we'd be airliners would be about 6,000 feet, descending to about 4,000 in that area, and that could be that as well. But again, if it's corporate and it's going to ORL, it might be lower, it might be more noticeable. So depends on where it's going, where we're going to.
Okay, now we started a tag team, and Gary McMullen involved in this too. It appears to me that if I put flaps and gear down, I'm probably not going to want to pull back on the engine a whole heck of a lot. I would probably want to maybe goose the power a little to make sure I still had sufficient power to continue flying. Gary, I think you've been a Gulfstream pilot too, haven't you?
I have flown a lot of corporate airplanes, so yes, I was. And what we as pilots all try to do is we try to minimize the power that we have during times that we're low to the ground. We also try to minimize the extension of the landing gear and flaps until the last minute that we can possibly do that. The reason for that is it minimizes the noise. We know that the engines can produce some noise, and the airframe can also do the same thing. So we never intend on lowering the flaps or landing gear and increasing the thrust of the engines unless something has happened that it's required. We always try to do it at idle. That's the goal.
All right. Jim, good job extending the tag team. And thanks everybody for jumping in on that. I'm trying to get to the right question here, so bear with me. They're still coming in. Okay, Lisa, can you show and elaborate on the noise impact on an outbound aircraft in the East Lake Tahoe and Fells Cove area? We may
Okay.
pull that noise analysis back up. And I think our team
Right.
can probably put an address in that area.
I was just about to ask if we can get an address in that area. And once you, you're more than welcome to use this at your leisure. And you'll type an address in right there in that search bar, and then pick one that is the actual address you're looking for. It'll bring you to this, and these model grid points are half nautical mile across the study area. And if you can locate one that's closest to your resident or area that you're concerned about, and you can click on it, and it will, if you bring that up, it will also bring up information about the proposed action, the no action, and then the change in DNL. So you can see the change at that location. And then you can also click on the one below it and also see the change at that location. So it looks like there is really no change there, but the first location, there's a very small change there, and only like 0.03 of a change. So very small change from this information here. I hope I touched on everything. And again, you can find this tool if you go to the main webpage, floridametroplexworkshops.com. Once you're at that webpage, you can click on noise tool, and it'll bring you here, and you can search the tool for that information for your particular area. Thanks, Michael.
All right, thank you, Lisa. I'm going to go back real quick to Phil Brown. Phil, I don't know if you wanted to share that noise hotline number. I know you referenced it earlier, but
sure. The noise hotline number locally is 407-825-2003. We also have a toll-free number, which is 1-866-646-6473. So those are, people can call in on those, and then at our website, orlandoairports.net, under the About Us page, you'll find a noise abatement form that you can fill out if you want to file a noise complaint.
Okay, Phil, thanks so much. All right, I'm going to go back to, I think this one's probably going to be a combination of, Gary, this may be coming to you. I don't know if Jim will weigh in, but under the FAA's proposed airspace, or I guess the project, will Southwest Airlines maintain its self-developed RMP approaches into Orlando?
At this time, Southwest doesn't have any RMP approaches into Orlando. We've used 2 RNAV visuals to a south flow for a few years, but we don't have any RMP approaches at this time.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Jim, anything? Nope.
No, I was going to comment on that those are, we call them proprietary procedures that allow the operator, in this case, Southwest, to code in essence, code the visual procedure, and it allows them to fly, in essence, an optimized arrival procedure. So they can program that descent down to the runway. And it's not an instrument flight procedure like we would code with an RNP approach procedure. Does that cover it, Gary?
Yes, it does. That's perfect.
All right, thank you both. I'm kind of checking the clock, but it looks like we have just a couple more questions here. Lisa, did the FAA's environmental assessment or the draft EA noise and other analysis consider additional or new airline gates at Orlando and or Sanford?
And Michael, I think we've touched on this quite a bit. That the answer would be no. It's not a part of this project. And if in the future those actions happen, they will be addressed separately in an environmental document. So I think that might answer that question.
I know Bob gave us the simple yes before, and you can give us the simple no.
No. Thank you, Michael. Thank
All right.
you.
Okay, we have a question. How many Central Florida community residents are currently viewing this live web workshop? All right, somebody behind the scenes is telling me that we have several thousand following the session, and we're reading questions that are coming in. We have another session coming up this Friday, June 12th for Orlando. It'll be focused on the Orlando area again. And that's Friday at 3 p.m. So we hope you'll encourage family, friends, neighbors to participate. If you come up with some follow-up questions after listening in on the workshop today, please join us there. I want to remind everybody that the questions that come in today or the chat through the chats, Q&A or text are not documented in the EA. You actually need to submit a comment. So we're trying to educate and have a dialogue in this session today, help you understand what project we're proposing and see what questions you have. And hopefully those are helpful. But if you end up with a comment that you want to make on the project, you need to go to floridametroplexworkshops.com, click on the comments tab. You can submit that right there, or you'll see an address. You can drop a card in the mail to us or email us, and all of those avenues are available on that site. All right, I'm looking to see. Looks like we still have another question. Sounds like runway 36 departures will be runway heading and will be west of current departure heading significantly. Increasing noise to Belle Isle and Conway along Conway Road. I'm not sure I get that, but Bob, maybe you can help clarify that again.
Sure, Michael. I think we've answered it before, but can we put a board up and take a look at this just to try to clarify it one more time?
Yeah, north departures in the close-in view, probably, right?
Yeah, on the upper runway 36. Can we have a board put up? There we go. It's too bad we can't get a little bit closer than that, but the answer is that this, like we said before, the new RNAV procedure will have aircraft east of the highway on a 006 heading, which will give the controller and the pilot a precise heading that no matter how strong the winds are, will negate signing a departure heading of 010, which is 4 degrees from the current, but does not protect from winds or drift. So basically, if we kept the procedure as is on a 010 heading, you have wind, you have drift, there's no track that the aircraft is going to fly that's consistently going to keep it out of that area. So this new procedure on the RNAV runway heading with a specific track will thus decrease the amount of noise and will actually help the residents in the area.
Okay, if I could jump in on that.
Greg, thank you.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind, or for those of you that are unfamiliar with RNAV approaches, is that when RNAV approaches are implemented and pilots are able to use the onboard automation, we're actually following a track over the ground. Current departure procedures where we follow a heading, basically we just set a heading bug on our compass and we fly a magnetic heading. However, when we do that, we're at the mercy of the winds. So if you have a strong crosswind one way or the other, we could be maintaining that particular heading as we're directed to, but the wind could be blowing us sideways. And sometimes those winds can be significant, you know, even 40 or 50 knots at 1,000 feet when the weather is foul. So RNAV procedures allow departures and arrivals to be more accurate because we track or we follow tracks over the ground, not just headings. That's just a clarification.
All right, very good. Thanks for that, Gary. Greg, sorry, and Bob. Okay, so I just wanted to share, we're not going to take any new questions because our workshop's coming toward the end, but we're going to work our way through a few more that have been asked already, and I'm just going to plug ahead real quick. Will the proposed action help decrease the amount of low altitude level offs and vectors given to turbojet aircraft operating at the Orlando Sanford Airport? Bob?
The short answer again, Michael, is yes. It will help there'll be less of level offs at low levels of the aircraft on a more contoured descent where the aircraft are coming in at pretty much low power or idle power coming down.
And that includes the turbojets at Sanford, right, Bob?
We're talking about the Orlando traffic now, are we not? And if we're talking about the Orlando Sanford, yes, it does include those two.
Okay. All right. Just clarifying. Thank you. All right. Here's one. Lisa, is this environmental assessment or draft EA based on FAA Order 5050.4B guidelines? I'm going to have to trust that you know that.
I do. This EA is in accordance with FAA Order 1050.1F. It's also in accordance with FAA Order 7400.2, which is the procedures for handling airspace matters. And we're also in compliance with CEQ, which is the Council for Environmental Quality regulations. So all of those are NEPA requirements, regulations that this document is in compliance with. Thank you, Michael.
All right, Lisa, thanks. And I think we have one more question. I live northeast of MCO and noticed that aircraft departing northbound to the west, even on the west complex, get a tower heading over us before turning away. Will this practice continue? Share the noise with everybody, I guess is what that, I think I'm reading that right. So I live northeast of Orlando, noticed that aircraft departing northbound to the west, even on the west complex, get a tower heading over us before turning away. Will this practice continue? ? Share the noise with everybody. Bob, can you help with that? Might go back to that north departure board.
Sure, Michael. Yeah, let's go ahead and pull the board up there. And as you look at the board, you'll see that there is really no change to the tracks. That the track themselves will continue overlying the current tracks. So what you'll see is that the aircraft that are still coming off to northbound to the west, even on the west complex, will still be flying in the general same tracks as they are doing today. What you will find is that they may be higher depending on where they come off at and the type of aircraft before they start their turns.
All right. Thank you, Bob. All right, so that brings us to the end of the workshop. I want to thank everybody for participating, for asking really good questions tonight. I hope our answers were informative, and I want to thank our panelists, our specialists who provided their expertise, and the entire FAA communications team and everybody who worked to support the workshop in the background and get things ready for us. I want to acknowledge the industry representatives, airport, airline, and pilot groups who joined us this evening to contribute your perspectives to the discussions. Those are always helpful, so thank you for that. I've said this a couple times, I'm going to say it one more, but as a reminder, the questions that came in today are not part of the legal record for the draft environmental assessment. So if after hearing what you've heard in the workshop, if you want to put in a comment for the record, please go to the comments tab on this website, Florida Metroplex Workshops.com. And you can also email us or send us a written comment, and those addresses are also available on the comments tab on that same website. The comment period is open until July 10th of 2020. And after the comment period closes, the FAA will consider and review all the substantive comments received during the comment period. And we're hoping to issue an environmental determination on the project in September 2020. This workshop has been recorded. It'll be available for playback on the website tomorrow. And we'll also be hosting another live workshop for Orlando this Friday, June 12th at 3 p.m. So that concludes our workshop today. And I want to thank you again for joining us.